Okay, so hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Gareth Bradwick, and I'm the International Project Manager here at Edmentum. I'd just like to thank you all for joining, and I hope you're all looking forward to today's presentation. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. It would be great to get your questions and comments so we can share them at the end of today's presentation. So you'll see that there's a questions tab, so simply type your questions in there and we'll pick that up at the end. That's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to our presenter today. So please welcome Victoria Esler, who is the KS2 Coordinator and Innovations Leader at Laude Newton College in Alicante. Over to you, Victoria.
Thanks, Gareth. And hello and welcome to everybody that has managed to join us today. I am from Laude Newton College, as Gareth explained, and I've been working there for 12 years now almost. I'm going into my 12th year. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share with you some of the work that we've been doing in the last few years with EducationCity. So here is a brief outline of what I'd like to try and get through today, starting with a bit of background information about our school and going on to talk about our innovations team. So Gareth mentioned that I am one of the innovations leaders in this school, which might not mean very much at this point, so I'd like to explain that further to you later, and that is very closely connected to the work that we do with digital platforms like EducationCity. And then we'll go on to talk about blended learning and how we do that at Laude Newton College, and then a bit more detail about how we're actually using the platform, so what we're currently doing and what our proposals are for the future in terms of assessment, target setting and intervention. And then we'll go on to look a little bit at what we've been doing with our SEND, our Department of SEN and our language support. And finally, I'm sure lots of you have experienced this, what we've been doing with our distance learning programme in the school in the last few weeks. So let's start with a bit of background information. And you can see on the right here a photograph of our fantastic school with all our amazing installations. And we have been around since 1991, so we've got quite a long history in the area. We are a private school and we are now part of a group called ISP, which stands for the International Schools Partnership. And that really means that we are a part of a really wide community now, and we have opportunities to share practice with each other and help each other to get better. So obviously over the years we have had to expand our school. What you can see in the photograph, these kind of orange, red coloured buildings, those were the original buildings. And everything else really has been built on since then. And in this photograph, what you can't see is an absolutely amazing new building that we have, which is over here now, which houses our EYFS, our Early Years and Foundation Stage children. So it's a really large school. We have 3 different stages. So I myself, I'm working in the primary department just now. And later when I talk to you about the innovations team that we have members of each of the 3 departments in that to give a kind of overview of how we're teaching and the methodologies that we use in the school. And as I say, it is a really large school, so we do have more than 1,300 students. There's more than 600 of us in primary. And I'm very proud to say that we do always feature in the top lists of schools in Spain, so the top private schools in Spain, and we do get quite a lot of positive attention in the area for being prestigious, for being innovative, and I think that's really key to the story that I'm telling you just now, because some of the decisions that we've made over the years I feel have really helped us to build up this amazing reputation that we have, especially with technology. And here we have a nice image of the beautiful building that I was referring to earlier. So you can see it's top, very new, top class. and that is where our early years and foundation stage are housed at the minute. So thinking a bit about curriculum, we are an international school. We are currently teaching the British National Curriculum, but we also incorporate into that what is called the IEYC and the IPC. So the IEYC is the Early Years International Curriculum, and IPC is the International Primary Curriculum. So some of you might have experience with that, but essentially what that means is that we take a topic and we try and teach our most of our lessons through that topic. It's quite skills-based. We do knowledge and understanding, but we do focus a lot on skills and teaching the children skills. And later we'll talk a bit more about how we do that when we look at the innovations team. And we'll talk a bit about iPads, one-to-one devices. And looking towards the secondary department, we have the International Baccalaureate, our IB programme, the Baccalaureate Diploma and Middle Years programme there as well. So we've got quite a large bag of different areas that we're covering in this school to meet the needs of our learners. So that was quite brief, the explanation of our school. It tells you a bit about who we are and a bit about maybe why we have developed the programme that we have, which leads us nicely into looking in a bit more depth to our innovations team. So this is a story that began in the year 2015-2016, and it began really with an interest in technology. Our director at the time was really interested in what was going on in the world of education with respect to tablets, iPads, mobile technology, and we were involved in that year in a very interesting conference where we went and we found out a bit more about how schools throughout the world were using mobile technology in order to improve and better their students' learning. So we became really inspired by that, and we really wanted to be a part of it. And so we began our, at the time we were calling it a project. It's more than that now. It's embedded completely into our methodology, but at the time we called it our project, and we introduced iPads to our Year 4 students. So we did this in phases, and we asked the Year 4 students to purchase a particular kind of iPad. We had all kinds of technical requirements. We went about training our staff in how to use these iPads to improve the learning of the children. And that has been the beginning of an amazing journey that we've had. So we've now grown from that. Each year we have enhanced it, and we now have iPads in all year groups from Year 4 upwards, one-to-one iPads. And those iPads belong to the children, they belong to the families. But what we do now have is access to iPad trolleys, and we're looking to further extend that as well, and we're purchasing an extra trolley this year in order for us to meet the needs of our early years and foundation stage, Key Stage 1, and our lower Key Stage 2, which is Year 3. So obviously that gave us a lot to think about. How are we going to approach teaching in this way? How much do we want to use the iPad in our day-to-day lessons? One thing that was really clear to all of us in the initial stages of the project was that we wanted a balance. We wanted what's now called this blended learning idea. We wanted to try and establish that early on. So we called our project at the beginning, we called it I'm Learning, which stands for Integrated Mobile Learning. And as I say, we were referring to it at the time as a project, but as it developed, it became less like an iPad project and more related to how we were teaching the methodologies. So with that, the name, the group grew, and the name had to change with it to reflect those changes. So we decided to call ourselves the IDI team, which stands for Innovation, Design and Investigation. And the idea there was to move people away from thinking about just the fact that our students had iPads and to start to really analyse how we were teaching. So we looked at different methodologies. We set about training the staff in inset days on the methodologies that we were really interested in using with the children. And in the end, we decided to kind of streamline that name, and we are now known as the Innovations Team. And as I mentioned earlier, the Innovations Team has a really nice mix of staff, of members. We have staff from secondary, we have specialist staff, and myself as KS2 Coordinator. And this is something that we're looking at the possibility of extending even further later on. So our role in the school as innovations leaders is a bit of analysis. We want to keep track of the way that our teachers are teaching. So we look really closely at pedagogy and methodology. Now with that, we created and designed specific spaces in the school, which I'll show you a little bit later. And these spaces are dedicated to innovation. So we have spaces that teachers can use, they can take their classes to, that really inspire thinking outside of the box, creativity, and design thinking, which is our principal philosophy. So creative and design thinking. But what it essentially means is we want our learners to be independent. We want them to be able to take real life situations and be able to manage and investigate them. So thinking outside of the box, that phrase, that expression, I think says quite a lot about this philosophy. So we're not talking about a traditional idea of teaching where you have your teacher in front of the whiteboard or the chalkboard telling children facts, giving knowledge. What we're talking about is discovery. We're talking about becoming facilitators for learning and designing the curriculum in such a way that it allows our learners to explore their own thoughts about problems. And it's working really well, it is. And going back to the idea of blended learning, what we've always tried to do in our school is to create a balance. So we have often, we take part in learning walks in our school where we are observing how other teachers, how our colleagues are teaching, and you can quite often see dropping into the classrooms children who are taking notes in their notebooks at the same time with their iPad in front of them, which they're using for research, for investigation. And it helps us as well to guide them in collaborative learning. So we use quite a lot of this style in our group work, and it helps us immensely with teaching the IPC in the primary department, so our international primary curriculum. Lots of the topics that we use in IPC require investigation, research, and so we do find the iPads are an amazing tool for that. But as I say, we are always looking for that balance. We do still very much rely on the traditional writing in a notebook, writing in a book, and we haven't lost that concept as well, which I think is really important. So I would just quickly like to show you, this is a work in progress. This is the website that we have designed, that the innovation team have designed. And this is something that I can share with anyone that is interested, the link to, because if anyone is considering taking this kind of step towards mobile devices, we have been doing this now for a long time, and we have all kinds of information here that might help schools to progress in that area. So do please let me know if you would like a copy of the link to this website. We have lots of information here about how we use the iPads, how we use the technology, how teachers are teaching with it. We've got a list of platforms that we use, including our EducationCity, of course, and a little explanation there about how we are using that in our learning. So anyone that's interested, do let us know in the chat, and we'll make sure to pass that on to you. And that is very much a work in progress. With anything that involves technology, you will all know that nothing is ever completely finished, that we're always learning, we're always getting better at it. So we're constantly updating that site with the new and the latest things that we're doing. So talking about this blended learning, and the photo that I've chosen here really relates to what I was talking about getting that balance, finding that balance. So here we have children who are learning how to play the recorder in their music classes. One iPad has the musical notes, while the other has an audio file that they're using to play along with. And at the side there, we can actually see the music book on paper that the children go between as well. So this image for me is a really excellent glimpse of what everyday life is like in our school. So you could see a little bit in that video of some of those spaces that I was talking about earlier, and they really do help to get the kids out of the classroom, to get moving. You can move the furniture about, and it really does help us with our creative and design thinking, and also with our idea of working together in teams, our collaborative learning. So we really do try and encourage that with our learners. So again, always striving for that healthy balance. We do have regular staff training days. So we do once a term have a dedicated day where we have our inset day, and there are always many workshops and classes for our staff to be able to attend to make sure that we're keeping up to date with any recent changes in technology. Now, one thing I forgot to mention at the start is that we are based here in Spain. The majority of our children and families are Spanish, so we do like to have that mix of English and Spanish in any promotional videos that we have. Now this section I think will be particularly interesting, I hope, for anyone that's looking at how exactly they can blend their technology into the classroom. So what I've got here is, and I know it's quite small on your screen, I'll click on that in just a moment and let you see it in a bit more detail. This is an example of one of my lesson plans. Now, as well as being KS2 Coordinator and the innovation, or one of the innovations leaders, I am a Year 6 teacher full-time, and I am responsible for the maths planning in the year group. So you can probably guess that EducationCity featured quite highly in my lesson plans in Year 6 this year, and will continue to do so. So I'd like to just take you and share with you a few elements of my planning. If it's helpful and anyone wants a copy of these, I am absolutely happy and delighted to share them with anyone. I do my planning now with Google Docs, so it's easy enough for me to share with anyone that's interested. So we're actually following this year for the first time the White Rose math scheme. I'm not sure, perhaps some of you have heard of it or you're working with it. And I was a bit concerned at the start of the year about how much I could continue to use EducationCity with White Rose Maths, because White Rose Maths is a whole different way of teaching maths. It's much more practical. They use, for example, they use bar modelling quite a lot. So I was quite nervous at the start of the year, but I can now happily tell you that it fit really nicely. The EducationCity learn screens and activities, they fit really nicely with the White Rose scheme, certainly in Year 6, and I know that Year 4 and Year 5, who I work quite closely with, have also been using it quite a lot. So what I would do in order to make a plan, what I would do first of all is take a look at the White Rose math scheme and have a look at what they call the small steps, which relate to I guess the learning objectives that you're trying to cover in that lesson. So that would be my first step. I would look to see, as you can see over here, we are getting better at. So what is it that I want the children to learn in that lesson? Now, once I've done that, I'll take a look at what the White Rose scheme has to offer in terms of activities, worksheets, and resources. And then my next step is to go straight onto EducationCity and use the search tool in order to see what kinds of resources that they have that I can use in that lesson. So for this particular lesson that we're looking at, we were trying to get better at solving one-step problem function machines. So that's an introduction to algebra for year 6. And what I did there was, and I would imagine that lots of you will do this, is a combination of different word choices. So you would try searching for a one-step word problem, then hone it down, as you do with your Google searches as well. And what we have here is, and a really nice way to get the lesson started, is a learn screen. And what I do, I share these plans with my 3 year 6 colleagues. And so I have the hyperlink to the learn screen already in there for them. So in a normal week, we would probably use up to 3 learn screens, possibly more. So out of 5 maths lessons, we would probably use 3 or 4 learn screens. We really enjoy using them. The children absolutely love them because, well, obviously they have that cartoon animation style, so straight away the kids are really connected with it. You've got the option to have the text on, so for our Spanish children, sometimes if I feel like it's explaining it too quickly, sometimes I'll pause it and we'll have a read at what the text is telling us. But by far one of my favourite features of this is that the children can then go home and watch that learn screen again as many times as they feel that they need to. They can share it with mums and dads, they can get their families involved, and so it means that they've got a bit of a connection from what they're learning in the school with what they can share with their families at home. So I do really love the learn screens. And I'll talk a bit more about how we use that in our distance learning at the end of the chat. So this is just a typical lesson where we start off with the learn screen. As I say, we would pause it during it, make sure the children are understanding and following it. And in terms of differentiation for my children in the class who need a bit of extra support, this year, for example, I had 2 children in my class who were SEN children. So for them, what I would always do is ask them to watch the learn screen again on their own with their headphones before they start the work. So it really does help those learners that find achieving those objectives a bit more tricky. It helps them, it gives them that extra support while you are then dealing with your other ability groups. So I did find it really useful in terms of learn screen, in terms of differentiation in my classroom. And quite often, again, I'll talk a bit more about this later, but quite often with my SEN children, I had other learn screens ready for them that were perhaps from the year below, so that they could still participate in the learning, but at a level that was more suitable for their needs. And then, as you can see, reading down through the lesson, we then go to, this is one of the White Rose activities here. So we're using a combination between EducationCity and White Rose, and it really does work nicely together. So I would say confidently we're using it mostly in maths, and we're starting now to use it a bit more extensively in English. So again, what I was talking about, the White Rose math scheme, is integrating nicely for us with EducationCity. And another thing that I absolutely love, and the kids absolutely love this as well, is using the Play Live facility as a fun starter. So basically, if anyone out there doesn't know what Play Live is something that you can use in math or in English to get your kids better at the 4 core areas of math, so your addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, and in English in their spelling and vocabulary. So we used it a lot. The kids love it. What they do is they log on to their EducationCity accounts, and of course our children having iPads, this is where it really does help us. Log on to their accounts, log on to year 6, choose the option of Play Live, and what I would do as the teacher to facilitate this is I would choose one of the 4 concepts. So I would say, right, today everyone, we are going to practice our times tables, so I'd like you to get on to the Play Live multiplication. So what they would do is get an avatar. They get to choose an avatar. Recently, they're like little snails that are on a race. And as the children answer multiplication questions, they can see their snail winning in the race and going forward in the race. So they really enjoy that. They can play with their friends. And again, I'll talk a bit more about this later with the distance learning section. But the teachers were getting involved. We were signing on and playing the Play Live with the kids. And it was like Christmas morning when they saw their teachers joining in. They were desperate to beat us. And it's such a nice, fun way to get their brains warmed up and get them ready for learning at the beginning of a lesson. The Play Live words, which is attached to the English side of things, I have to say I am not very good at it. My children consistently beat me. I find it really challenging, and they loved the fact that they were better than me at the English one. Okay, so let's take a look now at what we've been doing with assessment, target setting and intervention. And just a reminder, if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to write those into the box. I'm happy to go back and talk a bit more about Play Live, or if you want to see it in action, we can take a look at that at the end. Okay, so to give you a bit of background, for the past few years, we have been using an annual standardized assessment, which is something that ISP are working on with their schools. So it's a way for them to see how all of their schools are doing, how much progress they're making, and seeing if there's any schools that might need any extra help in any areas, just for evaluating their student progress. So we look at, we have these assessments in our year 4 and our year 6. And these are digital assessments. And that is important because what we would really like to do is make more of a move towards digital assessments. We want our students to be really well prepared for these standardized assessments that we are having to take. So what we would like to do is prepare them a bit better by using more digital assessments throughout the year. Because what we found was when those children sat down in front of the computer to take their standardized assessment, a lot of them were just not used to that kind of format. So we had children that weren't sure what button to press, how to use the mouse in the right way, how to get onto the next page, typing their answers. Now, I had no idea that our children would find that as challenging as they did. So what we are looking at now is the possibility of introducing more digital assessments throughout the year for formative and summative. And then hopefully that way our children will feel better prepared when it comes to that time of the year when they have to face these assessments from ISP. So this year has been really crucial in the development of that. We have been trialling the EducationCity assessments in Key Stage 2, so in year 3, 4, 5 and 6. We have tried quite a few of the formative assessments that are available for maths. Now, because we are using the White Rose scheme, we had to really look carefully at the contents of those formative assessments before we let our children take those, because there were some blocks of learning that took place in White Rose that didn't quite tie into the blocks of learning that were being assessed with those assessments on EducationCity. So we did have to look at that carefully, but in the end we managed to make it work. And what you can see here in this image is just the beginning of one of the children in my class, one of their revision journals. Okay, so looking towards integrating more digital assessments and the use of revision journals. So I'd just like to explain for anyone that doesn't know about this yet. So what the assessments on EducationCity do is, and they're working, I'm sure they're developing this so that eventually this will happen with all of their assessments. Currently it happens with most of them. So what happens is the child takes the assessment, and based on the questions that the child does not answer correctly, the platform actually generates a personalised revision journal for each student. So what you're seeing here is specific to that child. Those revision journals are specific to that student. Now this student that you're looking at just now, this is one of my SEN students. And I'll mention something about that in a moment. But one of the nice things about this is that you know that each of the children in your class, after having done the assessment, will then have everything that they need to be able to pick up on those areas that they perhaps were not feeling so confident in at the start. So I absolutely love the revision journals. Now what we're doing is using those revision journals, because we've now finished our assessment period, we've finished up for the summer, and we are encouraging the families to use the revision journals as part of their children's summer homework. So we're recommending that our students work their way through these revision journals in order for them to catch up on those areas that they weren't confident on before moving on to the next year. And now more than ever, I think this is really important, because with distant learning, now some of you will know this, any teachers that are with us will know this, some students were just not able to access the learning in the same way as others. So having these revision journals is an excellent way for them to catch up a little bit before they move on to the next year group or the next stage. So something that I wanted to say about this, this student in particular. Again, we're developing this idea. We're still at the beginning process of how we're going to be doing this, but I'm currently looking at how we can use EducationCity to help us to create interventions for students. So obviously when you look at a student's revision journal and you see those kinds of scores, that does set off some alarm bells. So what we would like to do in the next year is look at how can we then use these revision journals in order to help those and target those children that need a bit of extra support and help. So what you can actually see even is this is a year 6 child. They had to take a year 5 English assessment and were still only achieving 30%. So my idea, my proposal is going to be that we would then look at the year below for that child, and we would look at what areas in particular, after having done the year 4 assessment, what areas in particular that child needs to focus on a little bit more with their SEN teacher or with their language support teacher. So that brings me on to talking about our SEN department and our language support department. So what I've done is I've taken another screenshot for you of a different child. This child has achieved 40% in this English assessment. So again, this is only something that's in the beginning stages, but I'm happy to share my ideas, my thoughts with you just now as we're looking at this. So what I would like to propose this year and hopefully develop is that with a child who is achieving under what we would expect, under the level of what we would expect, is that we would go down in the system. We would then go to the year 4 test and then maybe even the year 3 test if possible, because the objective here is to find where the gaps are in this child's learning. Our SEN department have access to EducationCity and they take our students out for a lesson each week. They are currently using Learning Village, I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with that, alongside EducationCity. And what I would like to do is encourage our SEN department this year to be taking a look at these revision journals, because it gives you a really good idea of what that child really needs to reinforce, and it can really flag up some specific issues. And it's a great way to set personalised homework as well, so you can see this child has 15 tasks, so you could quite easily work out a programme for that child whereby they have to complete, let's say, 2 tasks each week, and then that is reviewed at a later point. The opportunity to take that exam again, and so on. So, taking a bit of a look, now distance learning, this puts a big smile on my face, because I know from social media and from friends and colleagues around the world that we were all experiencing the most difficult time in terms of teaching and learning, trying to engage our learners at a distance. And this is where platforms like EducationCity, they really did come to life completely. What I will say is that we have had EducationCity now for, this is our 6th year. I have always been the contact person, the person that deals with the lovely people in EducationCity. And I have been fighting for years to get the staff really as passionate and as on board with the programme as I am with the platform. And I think this distance learning period has opened everybody's eyes. I mean, everyone was really excited about it. They used it. They were engaging in it to a certain degree. But because of the situation with distance learning, I think we got a lot of staff who really felt like, wow, you know, this is an amazing tool that we can use this for distance learning, and we can use this back in the classroom when we finally return. So starting off with the learn screens, when we first started distance learning, our teachers were not teaching live lessons, but we were preparing lessons that our students could participate in at home. So the first thing that comes to any teacher's mind there is, well, how am I going to explain this new concept to these students who have never heard of it before? So a lot of teachers spent hours and hours creating their own videos, their own explanatory information booklets, you name it, they did it. They were superstars making all these amazing videos. And one thing that I used quite a lot, and I know that my colleagues ended up using really extensively, was the learn screens, because what the learn screens essentially are is it's a video. It's a video that the children can watch. They can watch it over and over again. It explains clearly what the outline is, what the objective is, and it's something that you don't have to spend hours creating, because it's already there for you. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it's animated. So you know that children, as soon as they see anything that looks like a cartoon, you've immediately got their attention. So they're really fun, and another point is that they're not too long. I know that I spent hours trolling pages on Facebook, trying to find appropriate videos for my learners, only to find a really fantastic video, but it was 12 minutes long, which is far too long for my children to be able to sit and listen to. So the learn screens are just the right amount of time, and so I did lean on those quite heavily, with especially in maths, for our maths learning at a distance. And this was the perfect time for us to give the digital assessments a real go. So we were experimenting with them. We tried our formative and our summative assessments. In the end, we had all of Key Stage 2 use the digital assessments at the end of our term. And that was mostly as well to not just to try them out, but to generate those revision journals that I referred to for the summer homework. A lovely feature that we now have access to with the digital assessments on EducationCity is that they generate a report for you. So no more marking in a mark book what each child got in a particular exam, no more ticking boxes for each objective that relates to each question, none of that. It is done for you. So you simply click on your class and you will see at a glance what their scores are and a breakdown of every question, every objective in that assessment and where those children fell down on. So it's really nice. And I believe as well, I haven't used that feature yet, but I believe you can actually export that information. You can download it into an Excel as well. So we used EducationCity quite a lot. We did use our other two digital platforms, digital tools, which are Google Classroom and Seesaw. So we did use that a lot. And what I did, especially with my class, was when they would do extra work. So my children were accustomed to receiving, we have dojo points in our school. The kids have points that they can earn. And my children were accustomed to me giving extra points for doing extra work. So they would quite often use what is referred to as pick and play. Now, pick and play is where they can go onto the platform and they can search for anything that they like. So if they know that they need to brush up on their fronted adverbials, they can type fronted adverbials into the search engine and play one of the games, one of the activities on there. So when they did that, what they did, and they became accustomed to this, is they would take a screenshot of that activity or their result and send that to me on Seesaw. Now, that was I think that's a really good example of how we integrated our platforms together. I could go in to each child in my class on EducationCity and spy on them and see what they're doing. But that was just a much quicker way for my children to communicate with me what they were doing on the platform. And they absolutely loved it. And yeah, as I said before, we're using it extensively for our summer homework. We are now in the middle of discussing with our implementation officer at EducationCity the possibility of creating a parent workshop, possibly in September when we're coming back, because what I would really like to do now that I have the teachers really on board, because they've been using it so extensively with our distance learning, what I'd like to do, the next step, is to get the parents really on board, because I'd like to share with them some of the features that they can use. You all have heard parents ask you this question: how can I help my child? How can I help with that piece of homework? My child didn't do well in a particular assessment. How can I help them? I want to be able to show them how to use the platform in order to help their children at home. So we are going to be organising that in September. Okay, so I wanted to try and keep this talk under an hour, and I've managed to do that. I'm delighted to say. I wanted to say thank you to you all for listening, and I hope that it's been helpful for you. Please do let me know if there's anything that I've missed or you want me to go into more detail about. And what I've done here is I've left my contact details, because as I said earlier, I'm happy for people to contact me if they would like if they would like to just share good practice or give me ideas, that would be lovely. Or even if you're after, if you want to steal some of my lesson plans, you're more than welcome to. And I'm also happy to share that Newton Innovations website with you. So thank you, everybody. And I guess we'll see if we have any questions or comments.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks so much, Victoria. That was really interesting.
Thank you, guys.
We've had some questions come through, so I just wanted to go through them. But first of all, one of the things I liked about what I saw, and it seemed a current theme throughout your presentation, is that your school seems to explore how you can best utilise the tools that you have, and it's a process that takes time, but it seems quite a progressive atmosphere, and it leads into a question that we've had about your innovation team blended learning. Training did it need for your teachers to get used to blended learning and this new approach, and how long did that implementation of it take?
Okay, thank you for that. So we went really quickly, I have to say. We went from the initial stages of having the idea of having iPads in the school to actually having them in the school was less than a year. So what we did was, rather than trying to get all the staff ready for it, we selected key members and we started to really concentrate on training those key members. And then what we wanted was for that to then filter down. So those key members would then take that to their teams and then they would filter that information down. So we did move quite quickly. We have now been using Google quite extensively in the last few years, and we are trying to get our staff to have, for example, the Google Certified Educator certificates. So we've been doing that now for 2 years. I think this is the 3rd year now we're going into that, and we still got quite a few members of staff who are not quite there yet. So it is very much patience is key. And first of all, I think it starts with having someone that has a really clear idea and a really clear vision of what you want from your school and from your staff, and then get yourself some key members together, get the training for them, and rather than, I mean, it wasn't really training as such. We were going to symposiums, they were called, they were talks, they were discussions. We organised, in the first year, we organised visits to other schools as well. That was probably the most useful part of that year. Rather than the training, was actually seeing teachers using that technology and using it in practice. So I would say that any school that really wants to implement this kind of learning, I would say you can do it in about a year. But just bear in mind that it is very much a work in progress. You'll need to develop it every year. We have specific training in every single inset day that we have to make sure our staff feel up to date. And this year we have had quite a few staff meetings where we have shared EducationCity training, for example, specific platform training. So it's something that's just constantly ongoing, really. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Yeah, and I think you make a good point there as well about going into other schools and meeting other teachers and learning from them as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been put in contact, because of ISP, we've been put in contact with a couple of other ISP schools who are at the beginning stages. So they are where we were back in 2015. And the nice thing about that is that they get to hear about all the mistakes that we made and the things to avoid, all the pitfalls. So we have some email correspondence with schools like that as well. And I'm happy to do that with anyone that would be interested in further information.
Great, thank you. Another question we've had is, can you explain the learning walks concept a little bit more?
Oh, sure, yeah, that's actually something that's new to our school. It's an ISP concept. So what we are looking at is getting away from the idea of someone coming in and doing an observation. We've all had those before in our lives where you feel terribly nervous. You're given a date and told that someone really important will come and watch you in the classroom. So what ISP are focusing on is learning. They are all about learning. They're all about getting better. And so what we're doing is, rather than having your head teacher come in and observe your lesson, we're opening that up so that all of our staff can step into each other's classrooms and sit at the back and just observe and talk to the children and interact with the children and see what learning is going on. We're focusing very much on the learning rather than what the teacher is doing. You're actually focusing on the children, so you're looking at their notebooks, you're asking them questions. It's not something that's scheduled. So our school, we're gradually becoming used to this idea that people are coming in and out of the classroom. Sometimes it'll be the head of primary, sometimes it will be your colleague that's next door. So we're creating an atmosphere, I think, in the school of sharing good practice with each other, and less of that old, the old nervous way that you used to get when you knew that someone was coming in to watch you and make sure you were doing a good job. So yeah, it's really nice. We're really enjoying it, and the teachers, we're learning so much from that, seeing how we're dealing with things in the classroom.
No, that's really good. Okay, another question. Do you use EducationCity in science? And if not, is there a plan to include this at all at any stage?
So that's a really good question, actually, because we haven't been using it as extensively in science as we have in maths and English, and that is mainly because the curriculum that we're using, the IPC, the International Primary Curriculum, we're trying to teach through these topics that we've got. So we don't necessarily have a specific science topic. We have a topic where we teach science through that topic, but there might be some geography in that, there might be some history, there might be some art. So because of that, we haven't used the science as extensively, but again, that is something that we are looking at. So just before we finished, we set all of the children up in Key Stage 2 with the science assessment, the end of year science assessment. And again, we wanted to see what the results of that would be, because obviously that's tied into the British National Curriculum, the science objectives that you can find there. So we wanted to see if there are any areas that maybe we need to improve on or get better at with our teaching of science within the IPC. So the short answer is we're not using it as much as we use it in maths and English. But again, work in progress.
Great, yeah. That sort of ties into another question we had about what sort of reporting can you get on the usage of EducationCity, and I'll just answer that if that's okay. So the schools can request full reports of the usage of EducationCity, and we try and tailor it to and talk to the schools about how they want to use it. So in that instance, maybe suggesting things that you could use in science and so on. So just to field that question, yeah, we can send out reports on usage and make recommendations. Just to finish off, we've only got a couple of minutes, but firstly, we've had a lot of comments asking you to share your website and lesson plans.
Sure.
So what we'll do is do that, if that's okay. We'll probably put that on our follow-up email.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, and similarly, we've had someone asking about looking into EducationCity in more detail. So we haven't got time for that today, but we'll get in touch to share that more. But finally, the last question. So I really liked what you mentioned about students exploring their own ways of learning and engaging with that. Also, your thoughts about blended learning.
Yeah.
But looking on your innovation team's progression, are there any main points you would say are important to consider or keep in mind if a school decides to start with their own similar initiative?
Well, we are now investigating the possibility of a kind of renting, a kind of leasing scheme. So rather than the children owning the iPads, they would be renting the iPads, And I mean, there's several reasons why we've decided to investigate that. But basically what we want is the ability for us to focus more on the learning and less on the technical side of things. So a lot of time we've got an absolutely amazing IT team in our school, and they are so dedicated, but they spend an awful lot of time dealing with individual iPad issues that students have. And it does become quite complicated in terms of topics like insurance problems, what happens if that iPad gets broken in the school, all kinds of issues. So what we are looking at, fingers crossed that this works and goes ahead, but we're looking at the possibility of phasing out the children having their own iPads and phasing in the idea of them renting it from an external company. And it would just, I think it would be better for the families. I think it would be better for the school as well. So that would be my first step, would be definitely have a look at the renting offers that are available. The second step, and we talked about this, Gareth, just at the end there, was visiting other schools. Talk to other schools, invite yourself. You'll find that schools are more than happy to let you come in. We had some visitors just recently. A lovely group of teachers came down from another school in Valencia, which is about an hour drive from where our school is, another ISP school. And they just wanted to come and see what we were doing. So luckily I was managed to free up an entire day for them, which was really lucky. And we just dropped in and out of classrooms. We spoke to teachers, we spoke to children, we saw entirely different lessons happening. So you would go in from one class where the iPad wasn't used at all for an entire lesson, and then you would go into another class and there's virtual reality glasses out and children working in groups in that corner with the iPad. So they were really inspired at the end of that visit because they had the opportunity to see what it's like in practice, and I think that's really important if you are thinking of establishing something like this in your school.
Brilliant. That's really useful, thank you. So yeah, we've just slightly gone over our time today, but I just want to thank you again, Victoria, for a really good presentation, and thank you for putting your time in to do that. And thanks to everyone who's tuned in to listen as well. We're going to send out a follow-up email with the things that we've gone through today, and there'll be a recording of the video too. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Gareth. That was a pleasure to be here, and thank you to everyone for listening. I hope it was useful.